Ichabod McMann. Ichabod McMann slowly made his way home, bleeding footprints all in a row, at the speed of slow molasses. And though each ran deep, their dented imprints were swiftly swallowed up in the snow falling in around his feet. And so he went, preceding his shadow along the dark, lonely road, all the while grumbling on about the rebellious lower jaw, currently waging war against its own teeth, and oh, the inhumanity of it. Ichabod's solid trunk clunked in endless repetition, as his vision lost steam to the crystallized dream closing in around him. The north wind blew its icicles in, poking cold, wet fingers straight through his skin before settling in to leave him bitten from every direction. Ichabod came to a halt. Straight before him and stretching without end was a detail he hadn't remembered from the journey before. Facing him was a fence line, whose insides seemed to be hidden behind clusters of shaggy, snow-covered evergreens, all in a row. Their daunting size and impenetrable depth dawned before him, as if to subtly suggest where Mr. McMann might not go. Ichabod slowly stepped to the right automatically, following the path beneath their massive reach. His wandering eyes admired their shadows, endlessly rising to kiss the midnight sky they blended so perfectly with. Their frosted branches extending glistening stars back in ode to those glowing from above. Ichabod slowed his pace again as he rounded a nearly familiar bend. Mesmerized by the surroundings he'd been swallowed in, he'd left the steps sliding under him without thinking, all shivers forgotten for a moment, when again the path changed from dirt to cobblestone beneath him. A clopping, clumsy boot caught over an undone tree root, hidden until that second by the roguish snow resting above it. Oh, the betrayal! My poor foot! He grabbed for it, stumbling, fumbling himself right into a snow shelf. The shock again unveiling the cold city lying dead around him, lost in the shadow of night-shaded alleyways. And suddenly, the magic had left him. Oh, poor me. And finally, the underlying sentiment surfaced, leaking with purpose as his outer condition fell again. Ichabod had nearly faded enough to match the state of the heart within him. His eyes rose from the snowy gallows, encircling his frozen fingertips with their biting companionship. His wayward gaze strayed to a warm-lit window he hadn't noticed a moment ago. Ah, a godsend! He nearly cried at his luck. He watched the steam gathering from the darkness surrounding him, collecting and spreading through the alleys along with the warm aroma of bread. The succulent stench crawled out in streams, as if leaking from the building's seams to beg for the company of anyone hungry. Infected by a sudden thirst, Ichabod brushed off his pants first. And to think, until just now I was beginning to imagine the worst, he thought. Rubbing his hands together, the man decided just one brandy might adequately warm his belly for the rest of the journey. And besides, he thought, there's no one to miss me in that one-room cell.
Exactly. So what is it you'd hurry back to then?
Save for that fat feline who's just fine without me, so long as he's left a full dinner bowl. Cold-blasted beast. Ichabod sighed absent-mindedly. So really, there's no one to keep me, he thought coldly, suddenly wondering what might be the point of stopping. Maybe sleep was the thing he needed. But the wet air and the frost gathering over his fingers made the friendly laughing and distant singing sound so appealing that without further thought, his feet brought him to the door, lest the rest of his body neglect their need for warmth. When he stumbled into the humble pub, he was met with a hoopah and a holler. Ichabod looked on in amazement as merry men went about their merriment, clinking glasses and exchanging smiles, as if each patron was an old friend. And they welcomed him. There was a magical component to this place. He could feel it in his bones. And the undercurrent hastily drawing Ichabod in had him under a single impression by the time he reached the edge of the bar. Where they are is where I wish to be. He unleashed the lusty confession, while looking around at the dark drink being tossed in unison between each. He nodded his head vigorously. Yes, yes, he gleaned. That's exactly what I need. That's the view I'd rather see from. He left images of his empty existence behind him, determined to be in this single moment, in the hope that to do so might grant him a good conversation in the time standing between he and his lonely home. The jolly tender broke in, welcoming the weary traveler as he sat atop the nearest open stool. I'll have one of whatever they're having. Ichabod gestured toward the rest in an attempt to be funny, but the burly man in a red and black checkered button-up shirt merely tipped the black cap back on his head to extend a friendly, unblinking smile. Ichabod, you stupid clod. He's waiting for your choice. Hurry. So he looked across the bar toward his options, before bursting out again. What a fool! He pointed, laughing. I don't care how good it is. What tool would name their brew such a thing? He ridiculed in the spirit of conversation, pointing at a tap labeled in scratched penmanship, Moose Drool. To top it off, he was pretty certain it was misspelt. But before he could dig deeper, a mighty roar burst out, as the tender laughed back. Without further offense, and with more grace than one of his size should be allowed, he pulled a pint glass from the sink and went about pouring Ichabod's drink.
Why, my good sir, we brew that blend here. It's our house beer, a favorite among patrons, to be sure.
He chortled proudly, as if in on some secret Ichabod wasn't privy to.
Try one. It's on the house, my friend.
The tender beamed again, as he sent the frothing, foaming mug across the bar to the newcomer. Now, Ichabod was a stickler, and he liked certain things. But he also believed hospitality a trait to be commended. So in the spirit of shared experience, he grabbed the chilled handle, and with the name in mind, he tried to find a happy place. As an unsure smile stole across his lips, he scrunched his eyes closed and took a sip, making a sour face in anticipation as he tightened his grip. But when the liquid touched his palate, it created the smoothest sensation. Where he feared he might find something of the name in the taste, he received the first trace of many conundrums wrapped up in this mysterious place. It seems, he thought, just maybe, not everything is as it looks on first glance. One might be impressive, he went on, or impressed if given the chance. He beamed over the paradigm, lifting his mug high with a hoopah of his own, and in the blink of an eye, Ichabod felt less alone. The instant the liquid touched his lips, it was as if he'd been infected by the environment. His view completely flipped into one of utter brilliance. He could have danced, had it not been so silly and he still sitting upon his bar stool happily. As he opened his eyes again, the colors seeped in from a broader range, and the outbursts from other men didn't seem so strange as they did charming. But the weirdest thing might have been, in the sudden shift, his newfound companion's appearances had gone with it. And even after being unmasked, in the aftermath, Ichabod found the fact completely unalarming. For instance, where there had once been a plump reverend at the other side of the bar, was now seated a little green man no taller than Ichabod's nightstand. And yet the only thought crossing his mind was how he might politely inquire where such a wee man had found his size in such mature attire. The first of many signs that should have risen a flag over his mysterious find. Had Ichabod have been wise, he might have realized that in times of such bliss, ones that seem so unrealistic, it may feel but a moment, and then the whole night's been missed at the hand of the dirty trick. If he hadn't felt so much better than moments before this, Mr. McMann might have noticed that something was amiss about it. But for now he reveled in the much-needed scene, as if it were one of a brilliant dream, in the midst of a living nightmare. Ichabod took another lush gulp from the dark drink, basking in the smooth foam still clinging to its outer ring. As he set his mug down again, he decided to make it his mission to learn each of the merry songs his fellows were singing, in the hopes he too might join in on the choruses. After a time of sipping his drink and listening to their jarring merriment, he began to catch whiff of a new kind of theme. Even though on the surface each seemed to be singing the same thing, the words were different to the extreme. For instance, one bulbous fellow was bellowing on about how he'd left and gone out to take a walk. Unaware for how long he would be gone, no doubt. Had he known, he might have kissed his wife before leaving her alone, to face this life, and if ever he'd wished to return, he was sure she'd be a-waitin' with her kitchen knife, burnin' so hot 'cause it had been over a fortnight since he left. A fortnight, Ichabod thought. Surely these were old songs indeed. That song seems oddly specific and far too long. But regardless, Ichabod found himself clapping along happily, laughing and whooping when the punchline dawned. Moving along, he thought. The next was no better, a thin man in an itchy-looking sweater. His words felt different than he displayed them, and the smile on his face was betrayed by the words, released from between his rickety teeth. He talked on about taking collections, and how he was a man of wealthy perceptions, though it seemed to Ichabod he was far too ready to give away the bruises on his wretched knees. And anyone who knew him, or so he claimed, would call him a man of the trees. Something, something, something. Again, Ichabod quit following along. The song lacked resonance within him, though a group was rising to surround the self-righteous man, clapping along, egging him on. Ichabod was getting ready to find another song to listen in with, when a chuckle sounded from the seat beside him.
Bunch of fools. They don't have a clue. They aren't wise like me. They're more like you.
The little green man had seized the stool, his beady eyes reaching through his companion. I'm sorry, whatever do you mean? Ichabod took offense on behalf of the cheery bunch.
I see.
The gremlin gleamed meanly.
Never mind me. I say things sometimes.
He shifted forward and signaled the tender for another of whatever nasty spirits he was drinking. Throughout his indulgence, Ichabod hadn't noticed that the once burly bartender was now man mixed with something else in this mind-bender. It wasn't until he'd closed his eyes from the side that Ichabod decided silently, I must be seeing things. He allowed the deception to sink beneath his skin through another sip of the frothy liquid, and as it soaked in, he was lost once again, convinced, swept away in the experience of euphoric brotherhood with the merrier of the men. Again he tried to listen in while ignoring his unsettling companion, still sipping as casually as one can when they found something so heavenly in their hand. In the mists of merriment, a new notion crept in. Ichabod craved to know the secret ingredient. It was all he could do to stay in his seat as he leaned in to get the tender's attention. I must have it. I must know what makes it so special. He watched the creatures heaving back as he poured the liquid from its vat into a rather slim plastic bowler's hat, which he gave back to a marbled feline. Now that's odd, Ichabod mused. He looks just like mine, only he's my size. He ended, followed by another gulp, and then, a cat as tall as me, isn't that something? What should have rung eerie, Ichabod found funny, and even as he thought these things, the timeless place waned on around him. Another song had come and gone without his knowing it, and still the little green gremlin was watching him, never blinking, his little lip restlessly twitching at its edge. He lifted his orange from the glass, still grumbling crassly, then tore into the wedge while still staring up at his unwilling companion.
You're curious about it, aren't you?
His twitching lip gave in, as if a final stitch had hitched it into a gruesome grin.
What makes it so special? The drink, I mean. So irresistible.
He hissed. Toward the end of his statement, his gravelly voice was nearly gobbled up in the joyful noise, but Ichabod thought he got the gist of it. Now, Ichabod McMann had always been one of intelligence. He didn't take information lightly, especially not from strangers, and most especially not creeping little goblins who stank of untold dangers and secrets of their own. Besides, nothing good ever came from listening to little green men, in his experience anyway. But still, a piece of him so small it should have been easily ignored remained curious over the answer to the secrets of anything. The goblin cackled, taking a drink.
What if I told you I could tell you what it is you think you want to know? But, what if I also exposed that the answer might make you never wish to drink of it again.
His sharp little teeth gleamed as he ground them, grinding his excitement at the stench of this human's uncertainty. He chortled and he chuckled and he leaned back and forth. For the first time since Ichabod had first seen him, the little thing seemed gleeful, as if he found his game delightful. "Look here, you diabolical little devil. I don't make deals or wagers with any man. Why would I plan to seal one with you this night?" The creature stood tall on his stool, lifting his glass sarcastically.
All right, you fool. Do as you will. Drink and be merry. Drink to your fill. Drink, drink, drink. I hope you never spill. Not one drop. Not one dribble.
He sang out, lifting his glass and sloshing it about. The rest of the merry men joined in on the loud chorus, for the first time, filling the silence together. The instrument was still playing seamlessly behind them, but the melody began to feel slightly off-key. So Ichabod indulged in another sip, slowly slipping into the common grip. In silence, the question quietly persisted, plaguing him. "Okay, I confess, I'm curious," he burst out. "At least give me a hint." Ichabod admitted and asked all at once.
No hints, you dunce. Think.
He snarled.
What is it you really want?
The green man growled. Ichabod looked about. This place was cheery, no doubt, he thought. But this drink is sheer bliss. Will I let him ruin it for me, potentially? And all for the sake of his opinion? Besides, what on earth could possibly make him never wish to drink of it again? With that, Ichabod turned his attention to his unnerving compatriot. And this thing, on the other hand, he compared, was as cold as the world without. He took another pull from the glistening mug, then looked around again before offering a shrug. I think I like this place. I don't wish to play your games. Should I choose to come here more often, I won't let your little reflection cast doubt over my vision of this space. His song rang out. Without his noticing, Ichabod had fallen in tune with his newfound brothers. They whooped and hollered, lifting him over their shoulders, all cheering each other along. The little green man finished his drink. Shifting in his seat, he shrugged himself down, dismounting to the crowded floor and disappearing between the boots, knees, and seats surrounding, unseen above the containers, tapping together overhead. His final words unheard through the cheering masses, as chaos reigned between sloshing glasses, jugs, and mugs. The idea of life before this was forgotten, between tipping hats and purring cats smoking from cork pipes. With all the odd things occurring Ichabod hadn't noticed, the vapor still rising all around him, released from his mouth as it shivered through each breath. Outside the warmth of that window, beyond the merry music, on the other side of Ichabod's numb delirium, there lay a dying man in a snowdrift. And should anyone have been brave enough to follow the phantom cackling as it stormed over the midnight alleys, waking those in the city surrounding, who covered themselves more completely, otherwise remaining petrified in fear as they did their best to close their ears rather than investigating. And so Ichabod McMann remained there in the snow as it swallowed him whole. He never seemed to notice death's approach. And if so, he didn't expose a wink of fear over it. He finally fell quiet as he felt his own heartbeat receding, fading, then coming to an end, passing into the eternal songs of the wind, where he still sings on with those who sleep in a similar fate, all the while searching for company from anyone quietly listening, until all that had been wrong is gone, and the cold they feel no longer.